The dinner table was set, and the conversation was flowing like any other night. My brother Tom was sitting across from me, grinning like he always did after one of his big business deals. Our parents, proud as ever, beamed at him. Tom had always been the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, the one who always had the most exciting plans, and the one who could get anyone to believe in his dreams. But that night, as he casually mentioned how his latest investment would change everything for him, I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. I had known about the money he'd borrowed to fund his venture, but what I hadn't realized was how far he was willing to go to make his dreams a reality. I tried to brush it off, but something about his confidence rubbed me the wrong way. Tom had always been the one to take risks, but I had always been the one to hold things together. Our mother had left me the family estate, the house I grew up in, the house that had been in our family for generations. It was my inheritance, my responsibility, and it meant everything to me. Yet, Tom's smile seemed too pleased, and his words too rehearsed, as though he already knew something I didn't. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just his usual talk about his big break anymore. He was hinting at something, as if he had already decided that his plans were bigger than what my inheritance meant to me. When I excused myself from the table, I decided to take a look at the documents that had been left for me after my mother passed away. I needed to see the will again, to remind myself of the promise my mother had made to me. But what I found wasn't comforting. It was a shock. I had always trusted Tom, but the more I looked into the documents, the more I began to realize that the money from the estate had been moved around. The bank accounts were cleared, and the property that my mother had passed down to me was no longer under my name. It was gone. I froze. How could Tom have sold my inheritance without telling me? How could he have betrayed me like this? I immediately called a lawyer, but before I could do anything, I knew I had to confront him. The confrontation was inevitable, and as I walked into the living room, I saw Tom sitting there, completely unaware of the storm that was coming. My heart raced, and I tried to stay calm. I had spent years watching him manipulate situations, but this was different. I wasn't going to let him get away with it this time. I asked him point blank, "Tom, did you sell the house?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the side, before giving me a quick, nervous smile. "I had to, Sarah," he said. "You wouldn't understand. The money's going towards something important. This is my future." It was just sitting there, doing nothing. I could feel the blood rush to my face, but I didn't flinch. It wasn't just sitting there, Tom. That house was a part of our family's legacy. You didn't just sell a house, you sold everything our mother worked for. You betrayed me. Tom's expression flickered for a moment. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice softening. But the damage was done. I pressed further, demanding answers. I wasn't just angry anymore. I needed the truth. What he told me next was worse than I could have imagined. He had sold the estate to pay for his latest business venture, a luxury resort he had been dreaming about for years. The house, the garden, everything I had grown up with was gone, sold to the highest bidder. He had used my inheritance as a stepping stone for his own success. "This was always part of the plan," he admitted with a self-satisfied grin, as though he had justified it all. "The estate was a weight around your neck. It was just a house. This is the future." But something about his words didn't sit right with me. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook. I spent the next few days digging through the paperwork, uncovering things I couldn't have prepared for. The sale wasn't as clean as he made it seem. I found a trail of irregularities in the documents, signatures forged, hidden clauses, and most troubling of all, I discovered that Tom had been planning to use the proceeds for a much bigger scheme, one that involved investors and developers who had no interest in preserving the estate, but saw it as nothing more than a cash grab. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that Tom had been planning this for months, pulling the strings behind my back. His so-called business venture wasn't just about starting a resort. It was about turning everything I held dear into a commodity. I had to stop him. I couldn't let him destroy our family's history for a quick profit. I knew I had to expose him, but I also had to be strategic. I couldn't let him know I was on to him just yet. I gathered my evidence, collected the documents, and made plans to meet with the lawyer. I wasn't just going to confront him in the usual way. I was going to expose him for who he truly was. Someone who had no respect for family, no respect for the past. My inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about our mother's legacy. And I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers because of his greed. When the day finally came for the confrontation, I was ready. I called Tom and asked him to meet me at the house. This time, I wasn't going to be the little sister he could manipulate. As soon as I saw him walk through the door, I dropped the bomb. "Tom, I know everything," I said, my voice steady. "I know what you've done. I know about the sale, and I know about the investors. You've been planning to destroy our family's legacy for your own gain, and I'm not going to let that happen." Tom looked taken aback. For a moment, he seemed speechless. But I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to come up with an excuse. "Sarah, you don't understand. This was the only way. You've been holding on to that house like it's the only thing that matters. I thought you'd be happy for me. This is my chance to finally succeed." I shook my head. "Your chance to succeed? By selling everything our mother worked for? By tearing apart what was left of our family's history?" "No, Tom. This isn't about you. This is about me taking control of what's mine, what our mother gave me, and you're not going to get away with it." In the end, I didn't just confront him. I took back what was rightfully mine. I made sure the sale was undone, the investors pulled out, and the estate was secured. I had exposed his lies, and for the first time in my life, I saw Tom for who he truly was. The brother I had looked up to had turned into someone I barely recognized. But in the end, it didn't matter. I had fought for my inheritance, for my future, and for the legacy our mother had entrusted to me. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. The aftermath of confronting Tom was not easy, but it was necessary. I didn't expect him to apologize, or even to understand the full weight of his actions, but there was something unsettling about seeing him so desperate to justify what he had done. It wasn't just the property or the money. It was the way he had treated our mother's legacy, something so important to both of us, something that had shaped our lives in ways he clearly couldn't comprehend. I spent the next few days in a haze of legal meetings and phone calls, making sure that everything was put back in its rightful place, that the estate was returned to me. But Tom's reaction to the truth had taken a toll on me. The angry texts and calls kept coming, and as much as I wanted to ignore them, I couldn't. He blamed me for ruining his chance at success, for holding him back from his big dreams. Each message was more desperate than the last. I even started receiving messages from his friends and business partners, some of whom I had never met, pleading with me to reconsider. They made promises, trying to manipulate me into believing I was making a mistake. "Think of the future," they said. "This could have been a great opportunity for all of us." But I wasn't swayed. The house wasn't just an opportunity. It was our history, our connection to the past. It was irreplaceable. There were moments when I questioned myself. Was I too harsh on him? Was there a way to salvage our relationship without losing everything I held dear? My parents had never been good at stepping in when it came to family issues, always too focused on keeping the peace. In the quiet moments, I missed the brother I once knew, the one who used to play catch in the yard with me, who laughed at my terrible cooking experiments, the one who had been there when things went wrong. But that person felt like a distant memory now. What I saw in front of me was someone who had manipulated everyone around him to get what he wanted, someone who would stop at nothing to build his dreams, even if it meant sacrificing everything we had. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Tom wasn't just selling the house for money. He was selling the idea of success, the kind that comes with instant gratification and the image of a life lived without consequence. He didn't care about the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into making that house a home. To him, it was just a means to an end, a stepping stone for his own personal growth. but he had underestimated me. I wasn't going to let him tear apart our past just for a shiny new future. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about showing him that there were consequences to his actions. He couldn't just play with people's lives for his own gain. I wasn't the same sister who had followed him blindly, who had watched him take chances while I stayed behind picking up the pieces. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let him take that from me. As the days passed, I continued to fight for what was mine. I worked with my lawyer, checking every detail, ensuring that the trust my mother had left was not just a piece of paper, but a shield. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep Tom's deceit ran. He had planned this for months, maybe longer. There were hidden documents, loans under my name that I never signed, and signatures that didn't match mine. But with each discovery, I grew stronger. Tom's web of lies was starting to unravel, and the truth was about to come to light. The turning point came one evening when I found an old letter from our mother, tucked away in a drawer of the house. It was addressed to me, written just before she passed. In it, she talked about the importance of family, the need to protect what had been given to us, and the responsibility I would carry in keeping our legacy alive. Reading it felt like a punch to the gut. My mother had known the kind of person Tom could be. She had trusted me to safeguard everything she held dear, and I couldn't let her down. I wasn't just fighting for a house or a piece of land. I was fighting for her memory. I sat down with Mr. Wallace, the lawyer my mother had trusted, and we began to strategize. We made calls, we sent letters, and we ensured that Tom couldn't move forward with any of his plans. Slowly but surely, the pieces of his scheme began to fall apart. His investors started pulling out, his plans for the resort stalled, and he began to realize that he couldn't escape the truth. Tom showed up one afternoon looking broken. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by desperation. He begged me to reconsider, to give him another chance. "Please, Sarah," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't understand. This was my only chance to get out of this mess. I thought you'd see that. I thought you'd understand why I did it." I looked at him, seeing the brother I once knew, but also the man who had betrayed me. I wanted to feel sorry for him, to forgive him, but I couldn't. Not when he had destroyed everything I held dear, not when he had shown no remorse until it all fell apart. "I understand more than you think," I told him quietly. "But you don't understand me. I'm not going to let you use our family for your own gain. I'm protecting what's mine, what's ours, and I won't let you take that away." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all the words left unsaid. Tom left that day, but I knew it wasn't over. He would keep fighting, keep trying to find a way around the truth, but I was ready. The house, our mother's legacy, was safe, and for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. But Tom wasn't done. As the days went by, I continued to receive calls from people connected to him, trying to sway me, trying to make me doubt my decision. But I had made my choice. The house was mine, and no matter how hard Tom tried to tear it down, he would never be able to take away the memories it held. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I had finally taken control of my future, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Not even my brother. Weeks passed, and things slowly began to settle into a strange new normal. The constant pressure from Tom, the threats, the guilt trips, all faded into the background as I focused on what was truly important. I spent my time working with the lawyer to ensure everything was finalized. Everything from the legal ownership of the house to the transfer of funds that had been mismanaged in the past. Each meeting felt like a small victory. The battle wasn't just about the property anymore. It was about taking back control over my life, over my family's future. But even as I reclaimed my peace, the scars of the past few months lingered. There was a part of me that missed the closeness I once shared with Tom. I didn't want to admit it, but I did. I had spent so many years looking up to him, believing in his promises, in his big dreams. He had always been the one who could charm everyone around him, the one who could make things happen. But now, I saw him for what he truly was, a man willing to betray his own family for a chance at success. And as much as I tried to justify his actions, the betrayal was too deep to ignore. I thought about the house often, the memories it held, the life that had once thrived within its walls. It wasn't just about the rooms or the garden. It was the essence of everything my mother had built. The laughter, the family dinners, the long summer afternoons spent on the porch. That was what I was protecting, not just bricks and mortar. I knew that now. Still, there were moments when the weight of everything hit me. I wasn't just fighting Tom anymore. I was fighting the system he had tried to build around himself. The connections, the promises, the business deals that were supposed to secure his future, all of it had crumbled. And in the rubble of his failure, I was left holding the pieces of our family's legacy, pieces I had to put back together piece by piece. One afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Wallace. "Sarah, I think it's time we had another conversation with Tom. It's about the final paperwork. He's made some offers and we need to get things wrapped up." I didn't hesitate. It was time. I had allowed myself to grieve the brother I thought I knew, but now it was time to close the door on that chapter for good. The truth was out, the house was secure, and nothing was going to change that. Tom was still trying to manipulate the situation, sending me emails, messages, anything to get me to reconsider. But it wasn't going to work. He tried one last time, showing up at the house with a new plea. He stood there looking almost defeated, as if the weight of his mistakes had finally caught up with him. "Please, Sarah," he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure if I was more angry or exhausted at that point. "You've already said that, Tom, and it doesn't change what you've done. You sold the house. You sold our mother's legacy. And for what? Your dream? A dream that fell apart just like everything else you touch? I've been cleaning up your mess for months, and I'm done." He looked at me, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. But there was something else in his eyes. Something I hadn't seen before. "I thought I was doing what was best for all of us," he said, almost pleading. "I thought it would make everything better, give us a better life, make up for everything." I shook my head, my voice steady. "Tom, you can't fix everything by taking from others. You can't build something real on a foundation of lies, and you certainly can't destroy our past to fund your future. I've been rebuilding what you tore down, and I'm not going to let you take it from me again." There was a long silence between us. He finally turned to walk away, his shoulders slumped. I don't know if he fully understood what he had done or if he ever would, but in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't just protecting the house anymore. I was protecting myself. The house was the last tangible link to my mother, but what I had learned through this whole ordeal was more valuable than anything that could be measured in dollars. I had found my strength, my resolve. I had learned to stand up for what was mine, and to protect it, no matter the cost. After he left, I spent the next few days finalizing everything with the lawyer. The trust was reinforced, the legal documents were filed, and the estate was officially mine. Tom, for all his pleading and manipulation, had lost. Not just the house, but the very thing that had once connected us. Trust. I wasn't going to be the sister who sat quietly in the background anymore. I had a voice now, and I was going to use it. The day I officially took control of the house again was bittersweet. It wasn't just about owning property. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind. The house, though damaged by Tom's actions, was still standing. It would take time to rebuild, but it would be done right this time. I looked out over the garden, where we had spent so many hours as children, and I realized that the memories of my mother and the strength of our family were more than just what could be sold or bought. They were in the roots of the land, in the laughter we had shared, and in the quiet moments that still lingered in every corner of the house. Tom may have walked away, but I had won something much more important than any business deal or piece of land. I had won my own sense of purpose. The future was mine to shape now, and I was going to do it with my family's legacy intact. The work of restoration was just beginning, but I knew I was on the right path. It wasn't long before things took an unexpected turn. I had been so focused on rebuilding the house, both physically and emotionally, that I didn't anticipate the next move Tom would make. I had thought, after everything, that he would accept defeat and move on with his life. But Tom, it seemed, wasn't one to simply let go. One afternoon, as I was going through some old family photos in the living room, I got a call from Mr. Wallace. His voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension that caught my attention immediately. "Sarah," he said, "there's something you need to know. Tom's lawyer reached out today. He's contesting the trust, trying to have it invalidated. He's claiming that your mother was not of sound mind when she created it." I felt a chill run down my spine. The idea that Tom would go this far wasn't a surprise, but hearing it out loud made everything feel real again. I thought back to the conversations we'd had, to the way he had tried to manipulate me, to turn me into the villain in this story. And now here he was trying to erase everything, our mother's wishes, the trust she had so carefully set up to suit his needs. I didn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. I'd been through too much to let him undermine me now. But there was a part of me that couldn't quite shake the bitterness of it all. Tom had always been the one to get away with things, the one who was allowed to make mistakes and just walk away unscathed. I had always been the one left to clean up the mess. Now, with the stakes higher than ever, I knew this wasn't just a fight for a house. It was about my family, my inheritance, and my mother's final gift to me. I met with Mr. Wallace that same afternoon, and we went through every detail of the trust, making sure everything was in order. The evidence was clear. My mother had been in complete control of her faculties when she created the trust. She had made it clear to everyone around her that the house was to stay in the family, passed down to me and no one else. The documents were airtight. But I knew Tom well enough to understand that facts and logic weren't going to sway him. He had always believed that if he pushed hard enough, he could bend the world to his will. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I had to prepare myself for a legal battle I had never anticipated, all the while trying to maintain the strength I had fought so hard to build. Tom's claims became more desperate, more aggressive. He sent me threatening messages, called me at all hours of the night, trying to get me to meet with him, to work things out. But I wasn't fooled. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control, and I wasn't going to give it to him. Then, one evening, as I was sitting in the garden, thinking about how much work still lay ahead, I received a letter. It was from Tom, but it wasn't a letter of apology or explanation. It was an offer, an ultimatum, really. "Sarah," it read, "I'm willing to make a deal. I'll drop my claims to the trust, to the house, if you agree to sell it to me for a fraction of its worth. You know how valuable this property is. Think about it. Think about the future. We can both walk away with what we want. No more fighting." I stared at the letter, my heart pounding. I could feel my anger rising, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. Tom was trying to buy me off, trying to use my own desires against me. He thought he could wear me down with money, with promises of a peaceful resolution. But I wasn't going to let him win that way. I reached out to Mr. Wallace and told him about the offer. "This isn't just about money, is it?" he asked me, his voice calm but firm. "It's about control. Tom doesn't want the house, Sarah. He wants to strip you of everything your mother left behind. He wants to win. He wants to prove that he's in charge. And that's something you can't let him do." His words stuck with me. I had spent too much time trying to protect something for the wrong reasons. It wasn't about the house, the money, or even the fight with Tom. It was about keeping my dignity, my strength. It was about making sure that I could look at myself in the mirror and know that I had done everything I could to protect what truly mattered, the legacy of my mother and everything she had worked for. I refused Tom's offer. I sent him a letter back, detailing my decision to stand firm and fight the legal challenge. I wasn't going to be bought off. Not this time. Tom had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let him use me or my inheritance as a stepping stone for his own gain. The trust would stand, and I would make sure of it. Days turned into weeks, and the legal battle escalated. But through it all, something in me had shifted. I was no longer just the sister who had watched from the sidelines as Tom chased his dreams at everyone's expense. I was the one standing up now. I was the one holding the line. And as the days passed, I felt the weight of my decision settle into place. Tom, though relentless, finally began to see that he wasn't going to win this fight. His lawyer's calls grew less frequent and his messages became less desperate. I knew he had realized that this time there was no escape. The house wasn't just a piece of property to me. It was everything that had been passed down from my mother, and I wasn't going to let him take it from me. In the end, Tom withdrew his claim. The trust remained intact, and the house was mine to keep. But the victory wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. There was no real sense of triumph. What had been lost could never be fully repaired. The brother I had once known, the one I had grown up with, was gone. He wasn't the man I had thought he was. And as much as I had fought for the house, I realized that I had lost something far more valuable: trust, family, the feeling of unity that once held us together. But I moved on. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild what Tom had tried to tear apart. Not just the house, but my own sense of who I was. The garden began to bloom again. The rooms of the house slowly returned to their former glory. And as I stood in the quiet of the evening, looking out over the lake, I finally understood the true meaning of my mother's words. Home isn't just about what's built, it's about what's left behind and what you choose to protect. I had protected it. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The months that followed Tom's withdrawal were filled with slow but steady progress. The house, though marked by the chaos of the past, started to feel like home again. I spent countless hours restoring the garden, something my mother had poured so much of her love into. I could almost feel her presence there, the way she had nurtured each plant, carefully tended to every rose and hydrangea. The house was coming back to life, not just physically but emotionally as well. The laughter that had once filled the rooms slowly returned, but this time it was different. This time it was mine to protect, and I knew I would never take it for granted again. Tom didn't try to contact me after his last attempt to buy me off. I think he finally realized that he couldn't manipulate me anymore, but there was still a weight in my chest when I thought about him. I didn't want to feel like this, didn't want to carry the bitterness of betrayal. I had already forgiven him in my heart, but there was a piece of me that couldn't forget what he had done. I had tried to protect him for so long, tried to believe in him, but I couldn't change the fact that he had chosen greed over family. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was that he had sacrificed everything our mother had worked for, everything she had believed in, for his own selfish ambitions. But time, as it always does, began to heal those wounds. I couldn't change the past, but I could move forward. And I did. I focused on the future, on the legacy I was going to carry forward. I took pride in the work I did on the property, in the quiet mornings spent restoring the old garden bench where my mother used to sit, reading her books and watching the lake shimmer in the morning sun. That bench, now fully restored, became a symbol of everything I had fought for. It wasn't just about the house, it was about everything that came with it. The memories, the love, the lessons passed down from one generation to the next. One day, as I sat on that bench, looking out over the lake, I received a message from Mr. Wallace. He had been keeping me updated on the legal side of things, but this message was different. He told me that Tom had finally come to terms with what had happened, and he had accepted that the house, the legacy, was mine to keep. It wasn't an apology or a grand gesture of reconciliation. It was more like a silent acceptance that what he had tried to take away from me was no longer up for negotiation. For a long time, I thought that would be the end of it, that I would move on, leave behind the memories of the past and create a new future. But something shifted in me as I sat there, surrounded by the life my mother had created. The pain of what Tom had done still lingered, but I realized that I was stronger because of it. I had stood my ground, had fought for something bigger than myself. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was protecting the very essence of who I was, and who my mother had hoped I would become. As the seasons changed, I began to feel a peace that had eluded me for so long. The house felt like it was mine in every sense. not just because of the legal paperwork, but because of the love and history it held. I had learned that home isn't just a place, it's a feeling, a bond that can't be broken by greed or betrayal. And in that quiet, still moment by the lake, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had chosen legacy over profit, family over ambition, and love over everything else. And as I stood up from that bench, walking back into the house to begin another day of work, I realized that the real victory wasn't in winning a battle. It was in building something that would last, something that would endure through the generations, something that was truly worth protecting. The lake house was safe, and with it, everything that mattered. The memories of the past, the lessons of the present, and the hope for the future. I had fought for it not just for me, but for everything that had come before and everything that would follow. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.